So let's start. Ron, do you want to say a few words before we will open it up for questions?
Well, thank you very much for just inviting me into your home.
Yes.
I am speaking from San Francisco. This is where I was born and raised. I was the teacher that conducted the classroom experiment called The Wave. The Wave was a response to a student asking how could the Germans behave after the war, claiming the Holocaust did not exist. They didn't know about it. With that question, I decided to introduce the students to several ideas. The first idea being discipline. Constructed a classroom experience that would have them move around the room, sit with postures, speak in unison. I thought that would be the end of the experiment. We could simply talk about authoritarian behavior. To my surprise, the students returned to class the second day with these zipper-like smiles. And I suspect they were saying to themselves, well, we'll just get along without a test. Maybe Mr. Jones can be driven into some new behavior. So I spontaneously went to the blackboard with my own curiosity and wrote strength through community. It began to describe community, la raza, a movement, a cause, being together, the joy of being together, doing something as a group. The wave then expanded into other ideas such as action and vision. The wave got totally out of control, drawing in all kinds of students from different places in the school and outside of the school. Over 200 students were involved by the end. It was tragic because I liked it. I enjoyed it. The order, the discipline, the adulation. Fortunately, 2 women in the class protested and my wife protested by saying, I don't like who you're becoming. I lost my French, I lost my playfulness. It was terrible. So I constructed a final exercise where we would have a rally, a huge rally, and I introduced the students to their leader, Adolf Hitler. The students left that room in total disarray. But for 10 years, they never talked about it. Just as the Germans did not talk about or want to be associated with the Holocaust. We had come too close to understanding our own vulnerability. We gave up our freedom for the thought of being superior to others. So that was The Wave. The Wave has gone on to become a literary piece with Todd Strasser doing a book that probably some of you have read. It is a theatric presentation worldwide. It is made into 2 documentaries, a lesson plan by the students that were in the experiment and The Invisible Line by a German filmmaker, Emanuel Rothstein. It's also been created into a feature film, Die Welle. So The Wave has gone worldwide and it probably migrated into your classroom. And I'm here to explain how it might have happened and what the consequences might be. I'm also here to tell you that this Zoom allows us to come into your classroom. I'd be happy to talk to you and your students directly, anytime, any place, Zoom. So now we can simply perhaps just go into some questioning.
Thank you, Ron. Yes, so we can both
I
try
would
and
like to
David.
ask something.
Okay, so we'll do both, one live one and one from the chat, and we'll see how it goes. So go ahead, Dorit.
Okay, hello. I'm very excited to meet you. First of all, I'm sorry I'm in the car, but
Drive
I did want
safely. God.
yes, unfortunately I had to drive. But I wanted to ask you, do you think, looking in retrospective, that education might be something that helps avoid the tendency towards discipline, the tendency of humans towards obeying and feeling good in a group, in a group that tells them what to do? Do you think liberal education does that?
Only if liberal education includes questioning. Questioning is the essence of freedom, the essence of democracy. You might ask yourself, do you have democracy in your school or in your workplace, in your place of religion, in your home? It's important to have questioning.
Okay, thank you. Oi.
Okay, so there is another question here in the chat. How the students felt like or behave after you discovered to them that their leader is Hitler. You said before they didn't talk about it, but did they react in any way, or was it just a silent?
Oh, it was chaos, emotional explosions, people crying, jumping into my arms, confused, resentful. It took a long time to rebuild that sense of self-worth and dignity in the classroom.
There's another question here. It says from Batsheva Gordon, was the book an honest representation of the events that actually took place?
I've never read the book. As a playwright and as a poet and a writer, I didn't want to have that version in my mind. So I have created a theatric work with young teenagers here in San Francisco. I think that work is an accurate representation of the story. But to be honest, I've never read the book.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
And I also
Yes,
have one.
Ilan.
Ilan?
Hi,
Yeah.
good evening. Ron, nice to meet you. It's an honor for me.
My pleasure.
I want to ask, today it's the Educator Day in Israel. And I want to ask, I want to ask in retrospective, do you think this experiment was educating, or we have a lot of power as educators, or would you repeat it if you knew the effect on students today, or would have you repeated it?
No, I would never repeat it. It placed students in danger. A teacher should never do that. It was a huge mistake on my part.
Could
Thank
you
you very much for the
expand your, why do you feel like, I mean, to my understanding, the students did get a lot out of it. They became good people and they know they have an understanding of racism and fascism. So why you feel like it was maybe a mistake to do it?
Primarily because it was out of control. For instance, one of my students that's never mentioned was a bomb maker. What if in the midst of this experiment, this child would have decided, well, I'll destroy the school, or I'll destroy some individual that's opposed to Mr. Jones or the Wave? I put that in motion, and that is dangerous. There are other ways to talk about freedom and democracy. You can bring into your classroom the immigrant or the Black Lives Matter or voices of dissent to learn about things. I think the Wave went too far and was far too dangerous.
Ron, can I ask
Thank you.
something again?
Of course.
Now in front of everybody. So looking back, can you spot the moment in which you think it went out of control?
Absolutely.
Just a minute, and there's another question. Whether do you think that there was some way somebody from the outside could have gone to one of these kids and pushed them back?
First of all, the moment which I knew the thing had gone, it crossed the line. One of the students assigned themselves to be my bodyguard. That was not a part of any plan. And this child was very much alone in the classroom. I knew this child, and I accepted the fact that he would now follow me around the school and be my bodyguard. We walked together into the faculty room where students are not allowed to enter. The English teacher there addressed that student. You do not belong here. Students are not allowed in the faculty room. And that child looked at this teacher and said, I'm not a student. I'm a bodyguard. And I knew at that moment that that child had crossed some invisible line. And I had crossed that same line. I knew at that moment. And what was your second question?
Was there anything you think somebody from the outside could
Oh.
have said to any of you that could have brought you back?
I was actually praying that as the wave unfolded by the second and third day, that someone, anyone would enter the classroom with indignity and say, what in the hell is going on here? Another teacher, the principal, a parent, anybody.
But
That
would
person-
you listen? That's my question. Would you or the kids?
I could have pointed at that person and said, this is the lesson. We have to have questioning. Once we have questioning, we have salvation. We will not be embodied into this evil, this wave thing. Questioning is essential to stopping evil.
So how did that teacher react when he told her that he was your bodyguard? How did you react?
Oh, well, I knew personally I was crossing that very same line. And then I began to try to think of ways to end the wave. But you should know that women were primarily protesters in this. There were 2 women in the class that began to put up posters, anti-wave posters. There was one woman that said we should not go to the big rally. And my wife was questioning my own behavior, saying, I don't like who you're becoming. You've lost your playfulness. You've lost your kindness. You've lost your thoughtfulness. I don't like who you are. And that was so stunning to me that I immediately began to think about, how do I get out of this? How do I create a rally or something that can bring it to a crescendo and make it a lesson that's still valuable? So the idea of the rally came to mind.
So there are quite a few questions coming in the chat, but the one I'm going to ask right now on behalf of Karen Barron relates to the conversation we've been having, and then the questions seem to be going in a somewhat different direction. But Karen asked, what do you think actually made the wave go out of control?
I think you have to put the wave in the context of the times. There was an unwanted war in Vietnam. There was racial integration into a white school, which was causing turmoil. And there was a cultural revolution in terms of the music and the style and drugs of the time. So given the fact that there was confusion surrounding the school at the time, I think that added to the prospect of a wave that would give simple answers.
So then there's a question from Naama, which basically is, was there a negative price to pay for the teacher, i.e., I guess you, and what was the reaction of management and sort of the educational committee?
The principal initially liked the wave so much that he introduced it to the faculty by giving the salute, which scared the heck out of me. In terms of overall consequence, 2 years after the wave, I was dismissed and fired from that school, and I've never been able to teach again in a public school setting.
I'd like to ask a question.
Go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just wondering, I know you've talked a lot about the negative consequences of this. I'm wondering if you did see anything positive that came out of the wave, any sense of unity amongst the students?
Oh, that's
and
a
the
good
second question is just, you said that you'd be willing to come to speak to my students, and my students are just dying to speak with you. So I was wondering how I can contact you to set up a time.
I guess you could go through I don't know, the offices here, or anyone here can probably help you do that. But of course, I'm happy
אפשר
to-
לפנות אלינו באימייל שנשלח אליכם ונמשיך משם.
So your question, though, was whether anything good came from the wave. Was that your question?
Yes.
Well, immediately after the wave, all the students and myself had to reconstruct how we felt about each other and how we felt about how to survive. So the oddity there was we learned a lot about each other in unique ways. For instance, the student that became the bodyguard, he was very much a loner, and I discovered that he liked to fix things. So I began to bring into the classroom things he could fix. Now, these are old things like typewriters, but everyone needs something that they can grab onto to have their identity in their life, to have value in their life. So oftentimes we were discovering those things. The bright students in the class, for instance, began to write poetry. And I like to write poetry. So that was a bridge to a part of a student behavior I had no access to until we'd gone through a crisis together. So oftentimes in a school, you're going through crises together, and that gives you an opportunity to work together to learn about each other. That was the value. Long-term consequence, it threw my life into turmoil personally. I wanted nothing else to be I wanted to be what you are. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to coach basketball. That was now denied to me. I ended up teaching at Stanford University, directing a school, but was fired for introducing gay studies. And then I went into a hospital setting where I was fired for writing about suicide. So my life just fell into total chaos. Fortunately, I ended up working with the mentally and physically disabled for 30 years at this Janet Pomeroy Center, which was almost a miracle in its own right. It's another whole story. But I've been blessed by meeting unusual people and having them in my life.
Thank you.
So sort of pursuing this theme of sort of what happened in the aftermath, there was one quick question. Someone asked how long the experiment took place, but then if you would answer that and then move to the, again, what happened the day after? Do the students still keep in touch with you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I am blessed, and you will be as well. You are young teachers now, but I can tell you, the individuals you affect today, the children you affect today, will be with your life perhaps until old age. They will come into your life and share their children with you, their hopes with you. And the internet gives us even a greater capacity to share those lives. That is part of teaching. You're a part of a life now, and that life will follow that trail with you. It's a blessing. So I still see many of the students. One of the students, Mark Hancock, maintains a website that you should have access to. It's called www.thewavehome.com. And that will give you access to what the students are thinking and doing today. And a matter of fact, last night, Verde, this is a Palo Alto High School students literary magazine, did an article about the wave. I think I sent it to Shira, but it's fascinating because it tells you what they're thinking and doing today, 50 years after the fact.
I would like to ask a question, if that's okay. Can you think of using the slogan, what you said, slogan, community is power, in a positive way, in a way which won't take the individualism away from them, but to actually take the experiment and only funnel it to positive means?
Yeah, I think you can find that like in the American Constitution. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's our goal? Pursuit of happiness? What an amazing document. So I do find writings and documents that thrill me with the prospect of a world of social justice. I find that all around me. I find that in Black Lives Matter literature. I'm sure you find it all around you, perhaps in the temple, perhaps in the school, perhaps in the utterings of a child. It's there waiting for us to discover. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Whoa, good stuff. I suspect you have it in your Constitution.
I'm seeing Shai Maon seems to have asked a question about whether the experiment actually used sociological and psychological research about.
Oh, honey, no. Listen, it was all improvisational. It's almost like theater. Each day prompted a whole new discovery. I would write strength through community and then begin to ponder, what is community? And then I would pull out of my desk some cards and pass out membership cards and have the students make membership cards. What is action? Proselytizing brothers. And each day prompted a whole series of interactions that were quite spontaneous. And I think that was part of the power behind the experiment. Students were involved in being a part of it. And oddly enough, it's the students I missed. As a teacher, you always see the kids up in front. They're like you. And you see the kids in the back because they're outlaws and they're charming and they're wonderful and they're curious. They're not following around. But you miss the ones in the middle that are sitting there quietly, just content to get along. And suddenly that group in the middle, that silent group, suddenly they had value and power and essence. And it was amazing to witness that as a teacher.
Can I ask a question?
There is another question in the chat. Do you think a similar experiment could have worked today? And if you feel there is a difference in the emotional strength of students today and back then?
Here's your answer. You think this can happen today? Students can organize themselves in a moment. They can be on the streets in a moment. They can agonize together in a moment. This has changed everything. I get emails every day from children. They're experimenting with how to bring people together in odd, different ways. The world has changed. My world had newspapers to inform me. My world had television to inform me. This world today has this. It's instantaneous. It's changing how we talk, how we communicate, how we live. It's exciting to be a part of this world. Your students are going to create their own reality with this.
So speaking of pedagogy, there are a couple of questions I would say along that theme. Shachar Ophir asks, would a co-op teaching model help limit such adventurous teaching practices in your opinion?
Yes, absolutely. Anytime we can work together and share our life experience or our classroom experience with others, the experience is going to be stronger. We need opposite views, different opinions to create a total fabric. Otherwise, we often can go off on our own thinking that is superior to others. And that's the danger of fascism.
And then a somewhat similar question, I'm sorry, from Yaakov Grubunsku. I'm sorry, I think I just totally messed up that last name. Anyway, the wave was obedience and polarization taken to the extreme. But do you think that more subtle behaviors of this kind are likely to develop between students in a natural way? Is there a way to spot them at an early stage and to prevent them?
Yeah, I think you're right on that. We all have a natural inclination to want answers. We have a natural inclination to want to be a part of a group, a natural inclination to be valued, to be wanted. And that can lead to the idea that we're better than other people around us. And that can lead to fascism. And I just got a big O on my screen, whatever that means.
Any other questions from all of you participants?
I want to ask another question, if it's okay.
2 questions are good.
I can't open the camera right now. Thank you. I want to ask 2 questions. First of all, if you think charismatic, I think you've been a charismatic teacher because they followed you. Is a charismatic educator is something maybe not, or too charismatic educator is problem? And the other question, you sound quite peaceful now for the results of you got fired and all these years, but I want to ask what helped you to move through this firing or through this period afterwards? And would you imagine that your experiment would have such a big wave throughout the world at the time? or your, or
Well, I sure had no expectation that the wave would be a worldwide phenomenon, that's for sure. I was despondent upon being fired and dismissed from the opportunity to teach. I was very fortunate to stumble into let me explain how I got the job finally at the Janet Pomeroy Recreation Center for the Handicapped. As a writer, I'd written a small book called The Acorn People about working with physically disabled children. I was at an educational conference and this woman approached me. She was well-dressed and coiffured, and she said, "Mr. Jones, I like your book, The Acorn People. Someday, Mr. Jones, you will work for me." Well, years passed and I suddenly got fired from teaching at Mount Zion Psychiatric Hospital. And I now knew, oh my God, I can't go home again and tell my wife I've been fired again. There must be a fundamental flaw in my behavior, a fundamental flaw in who I am. But I remembered this woman's conversation. So I frantically drove through San Francisco looking for this woman in this center. It was at the very edge of the city, and I walked into this Janet Pomeroy Recreation Center for the Handicapped, and there was her name. And I addressed this little woman that's at the desk, this chicken lady, and I said, "Could I please speak with Janet Pomeroy?" This woman goes to the office and comes out with this woman, Janet Pomeroy. She's now dressed the same way, beautifully well-dressed, coiffured, but she's holding a Bible. And I go, oh, no, 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 no. I've fallen into some evangelical world. This is not what I wanted. But she said, "Now, wait a minute, Ron. Just a minute. God has sent you." And now my mind is going, I just got to get out of here. This is not where I want to be for sure. And then she went into the secretary's typewriter and pulled out a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper was a job description with my name.
wow.
I hadn't seen this woman for 2 years, and it was only a brief conversation. And there in front of me was this job description with my name on it. How did she know I would be there? How did she know I was even coming? I took the job, and I was so grateful for it. And I love teaching there. I don't know where life takes you. Life can't be planned or explained. It's only be appreciated. That's been the essence of my life. Falling into and out of events and places and things, always having a loving wife at my side, children and grandchildren, and just being lucky to be alive.
Thank you very much.
So there are two more questions that have popped up, but since you just made such a lovely comment about your wife, I'm going to jump ahead of myself. It says, was your wife affected by the experiment during and after? And Nadia Dahan says that according to the book, you worked together.
Well, when one has a companion in life, we're very fortunate to have someone that you can share a life with. And my wife and I have been married for 57 years. We met in high school. So it's one of those romances that just gets stronger with the passage of time. I think she's always been there at my side and questioning what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. And it allowed my life. Here, I'll show you. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's my wife. Yeah, you're lucky to have a companion like that. I can't imagine you ever going through life without someone that you love and they love you back.
So the question that I skipped that I'll go back to, hold on, it just jumped away. There we go. Have you conducted any other powerful experiments to convey a message or a teaching goal? This is from Alain Navon.
Absolutely. I was working with the physically and mentally disabled for years, and I love basketball, so I decided to create a basketball team. My basketball team consisted of men and women, young and old, some in wheelchairs, some without sight, some autistic, but then who do you play? I mean, no one wants to play you, right? So I began to invite local schools and churches and union organizations, politicians to come and play us. And it became this great game of theater. It's joy, pure joy. The mentally and physically disabled, particularly Down syndrome, just have this essence of life. They like to dance in the middle of a basketball game. So it's just, that was an experiment I did, bringing in traditional basketball teams to play against a very disabled basketball team, but then it turns into something totally unexpected, and that is joy. So I guess that was my greatest experiment outside of the wave.
You might have answered Golan's question a little bit, but it says, did you come to your class with an experimental plan that particular day? Or did it come to you in the same lesson spontaneously and then become an experiment?
Only the first day was planned. The subsequent days were all improvisational. I was feeding off what the class was doing, what I was thinking, and we would just follow trails of adventure, such as membership cards, or the idea of how do you salute? What is a salute? I mean, heaven forbid. So one of the children thought about waves, and that became the essence, that became the story of the third wave. It came from a student's directive. Mr. Jones, you like to surf. What are waves like? Well, there's always the big wave out there. It's the third wave. It's Third Reich, of course, but so spontaneous, all spontaneous.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Do you hear me? Okay. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much. I'm so excited. I watched the film for the first time when I was 8, like in my 3rd grade. So it was very influential on my upbringing and all of my class, actually. I wanted to ask, in Israel, it's so popular. We all study it in high school. How is it in the United States?
As I was saying earlier, it's pretty quiet. Like the United States, we don't like to admit racism or immigration, or there's a lot of things we hide from. And the wave is one of the things that in the United States we hide from. For instance, it's not on PBS. It's not been shown on my local station. It remains a mystery, really. We hide from things. We're really good at that. Racism, not here.
Thank you.
Yeah, although students respond. So the society remains isolated and indifferent, but students read and they react and they respond.
So that's probably a good segue to a question I jumped over, and I'm going to ask it, but you have the option clearly of choosing not to answer it. And the question is, can you please say something about polarized American politics?
Of course, very dangerous. Our president is an individual that speaks in hateful terms. Very, very dangerous. Not admitting that the election might be passed and finished. Wow. Not bringing us together as a people. Not solving problems as a people. Relying on hatred, division. Very, very dangerous. I know he's helped Israel a lot, and I suspect you have a different opinion of our president. But I, as a citizen, looking forward to a day where we'll have intelligent answers and an attempt to solve problems with a mask.
Maybe I can connect to that and say that I think a lot of people here do agree with you. Do you think, it made me think about it, that maybe he uses all kinds of techniques like the wave with people.
Yeah, he is an authoritarian individual. He's a fascist.
That seems to me like the scary thing about him, that it's exactly what, it reminds of Germany in the 30s or the wave.
Well, everything revolves around him. Everything is personalized. Instead of looking at us as a community, it's self-aggrandizement, and it's not healthy. I feel sorry for him, actually. I know in a way, because I experienced the wave, I know he's experiencing paranoia right now. I experienced that with the wave, fearing that someone else would take over, someone else would be in control. It might revolve into chaos and confusion. So I have an insight into his behavior.
Hmm.
He's afraid right now, and he's alone. Strange, isn't it?
So
I
switching.
think his wife agrees with your wife that you're not kind when you're in this situation. I have a feeling she agrees with her.
I feel sorry for her as well. I hope she and her son are enjoying relationships. And
Ron, so maybe we can move to another question. What is, in your opinion, the role of the teachers today? And if I might add to that, I feel like sometimes the teachers are kind of afraid to cross the line and show and experience with their children in the class, experience real education, like show them real cases from life, and then it become maybe politics. And my question is, what is, in your opinion, what is the position, what is the role of the teacher, and what is the limit of education in class?
well, I was unfortunate that I was a very young teacher. Therefore, I did not have connection with the older teachers. You cannot operate alone. Never be alone as a teacher. Always have other teachers talking to you about what you're doing, why you're doing it. You have to have an affinity group. You have to have friends that you can share your opinions and feelings with. That might even include the school administration. Never be alone. That leads you to great danger, personally as well as politically, as well as the benefit to your students. You don't want to be alone. You want to live in a world of questioning. That's why democracy is so important in a school. I suspect when I visited Israeli schools, I really felt that. I was saying earlier that Israeli schools are unique because there's so many different, Orthodox schools, more liberal schools, free schools almost, kibbutz schools. I saw a great variety of schools and a lot of ways for teachers to be a part of a community, not be isolated, not be alone. And there's a benefit to that, I think. You can do great things together. You can take risks together. Risk-taking is important.
But again, if we do that, risk-taking like you did, okay, and you have made a mistake and it did cost you your job, okay? So basically risk, I would say, I would phrase myself differently. Do you agree with the management that fired you due to the mistake you've made? Do you think that's the right response, or do you think they should have said, okay, he made a mistake, let's move forward, just learn from it, you and them, and move forward?
Well, you should understand that the wave was not a part of the decision to fire me. That was probably based on other issues that were involved in. I was the faculty advisor to the Black Student Union, a faculty advisor to the United Student Movement, which was Venceremos, a faculty advisor to students going off campus. I think that was the thing that frightened the school immediately and the school administration. And the school administration was run by corporations. It was Hewlett Packard, which was a large industrial corporation. They were the head of the school board. So you are dealing with these realities, but that shouldn't stop you from standing up for the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. These are very, very important to society and social justice. I think that's part of our role as teachers, not to be afraid and to bring into our classroom the issues that affect our students and the future. But to inform the school district of what the heck you're doing so that they're not alarmed and surprised. Invite them into your classroom so they can see what you're bringing into the room. If you're bringing in a Palestinian student or someone that's might be questioning what the government's doing, so that there's no mystery involved in what you're doing, no surprise. But again, a community. you might even change that administrator's view of the world. They know that they can take chances as well. I've always, my wife and I were lucky. We lived distant from the school. So parents started inviting us into their homes for dinner. So when the time of my crisis came, when the school district wanted to fire me, over 300 parents and students took over the gymnasium and refused to leave until there were public hearings. And that saved my soul. The fact that these teachers and fellow parents would stand up and question the school and forced a different kind of resolution. The school, in truth, offered me another job in another school that I did turn down. So it's not easy, but I think if you involve the parents, if you involve the administration, if you involve your students in what you're doing and thinking, you'll be safe.
Thank you.
There's a request for actually to see the salute. So can you show us the
No.
salute?
I have never done the salute. I've been asked, no, why?
Okay, moving onward. I see something here from Batsheva Gordon. And I'm actually not, well, okay, I'm going to ask it, but of course you did say that you haven't read the book. She's curious about the book. And she said when she was teaching it, there were two versions floating around, one by somebody called Todd Strausser and another by someone else. And she's curious whether there's a story about these two versions.
The Todd Strasser version came from the original teleplay by Norman Lear. He took the teleplay and created it into a novel. I've chatted with Todd many times and I respect him as a writer, so I suspect it's a good telling of the story.
Great.
However, if you want to know what actually happened, you have access to two documentaries. One is Lesson Plan. That was done by the students in the classroom. And the second is this one by Emanuel Rothstein, The Invisible Line. So you have two documentaries that actually allow your students to interact with the students that took part in it. And they are very valuable. What luck you have access to this.
Great, thank you. I see a question from Naama, and it's, whether it actually refers to the question you and I had at the beginning of the discussion about whether there are other countries that, use the book or the film whether other countries use the book, the film, the experiment in the same way that Israel does.
Yeah, I was saying earlier that it's performed internationally as a play. So I have witnessed plays like in Hong Kong where in the middle of the play, the students all ran out and part of the umbrella movement, then came back into the theater for the remainder of the play. It's performed in Barcelona, Germany. It's performed in Israel as a play. So that's one of the ways the story gets transported worldwide. And I was saying earlier that just a couple of weeks ago, a Russian journalist did a YouTube about violence and the wave. And he even included the experiment at Stanford University, the prison experiment. But this YouTube essay now has 2 million viewers. The world has changed in terms of how do we communicate stories. It's fascinating to me. It's just amazing. And it's this again.
So we want to be respectful of everybody's time, right? The amazing cell phone. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. There are a few more questions in the chat, but before I ask them, I want to see if anybody else has any comments or questions that they themselves would like to ask Ron directly. Okay, we'll finish it up with these few questions. Two of them are serious, and then one of them I think is a really nice way to end. So on the serious ones, Shiri Shem
I do have a
Tov.
question. My microphone wasn't working first.
Oh, Shai, go ahead.
סליחה, בטעות השתקתי אותך, חשבתי שזה, אתה יכול לפתוח את ה...
Sorry. So again, just wanted to ask, I see that you have referred to this experiment as evil, and some of the teachers here refer to it as a mistake. But it's inarguably changed the world and the way that our education system actually teaches this topic for the better. And I would like to know if you think that the good is greater than the bad here, and if you were asked to reconstruct the experiment today in a different manner, maybe, what would you do differently?
Shai, that's a really a great question. I personally believe that it's Locke versus Hobbes. I believe that people are basically good. And if you believe people are basically good, you can have democracy, you can have discussions like this, you can create a world of social justice. If you believe people are basically bad, then you need police departments, you need armed it's a different world. You need the Gestapo, you need violence, you need hatred, you need villainy, you need all the things that I think are evil. So it's a fundamental question you ask. Are we basically good? Then we can have democracy and hope. Are we basically bad? Then we have Trump. I think we're good.
And to referring to my second question, if you were asked to reconstruct the experiment today, what would you do differently?
Well, as a writer, I'm probably constantly reconstructing this drama between good and evil. I just finished writing a book about racism in the South and 3 students. And I realize what I'm doing, trying to explain the hopefulness that we have and the dangers that we face every day. So as a writer, you get to explore those things, or as a poet, you get to, I'll give you a final poem. This is my last suggestion. There is a moment in time that comes to everyone. This moment in time, it's not expected. Something is wrong. Injustice right in front of you. What will you do this moment that is here today? Will you speak out loud or pray it away this moment? The choice you must make for silence and fear, or risk that will take you to freedom. Freedom, what will you do? There is a moment. I think we all face that moment every day in our classroom, in our family. We make the choices for freedom, for what else?
Thank you for this answer.
Thank you so much, Ron.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other question that would really be appropriate after that final comment and song that you just presented to us. So with due respect, because I know the ministry would actually like to have the teachers stay on to have a conversation. I think I'd like to ask all of us to sort of thank Ron. You know, we can put our hands up, we can clap, we can. But anyway, this is a wonderful opportunity. Thank you, Ron, for your thoughts, your inspirations, your guidance. Thank you, teachers, for all you do. And yes, the person who reminded us that this is Israeli Teachers' Day. And so we know how hard it's been for you, particularly over these past 3 months. It's always hard being a teacher, but these past 9 months have been extra special hard. So please let Shira know, let me know at the ACJ if there's any way that we can continue to support you doing the good work that you do. And with that, I would like to wish everybody who celebrates a Chag Chanukah Sameach.